Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. Today is the 21st of June 2023. And following are the stories that we will be trying to discuss in detail from different perspectives during the course of the show. In our first story today, we'll be talking about the Israeli expansion plan to build over 4,500 new settlements in the occupied West Bank. This has been criticized on different levels, national and international, including our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who in a tweet talked about that this Israeli plan makes a universally accepted goal of achieving two-state solution even more distant and sows the seeds of renewed and perpetual instability and violence. We'll be talking about the latest as far as the barbaric attitude of the Israelis towards the Palestinians is concerned in our first segment. Our second story today concerns the United States of America and India. Now, Narendra Modi is visiting the United States of America on an official visit, and dozens of US President Joe Biden's fellow Democrats have urged him to raise human rights issue with the Indian Prime Minister during his visit to Washington. This is a letter that has been signed by more than 70 parliamentarians. Let's see what happens. Nevertheless, there's a lot of hue and cry and protest as far as this visit is concerned because of the human rights abuses that India has been carrying out within its country and in the Indian Hill Valley. Then we'll be talking about the 70th birthday celebrations of our former Prime Minister, the only woman Prime Minister from the Muslim world, Muhtarma Shahid Benazir Bhutto Sahiba. She would have turned 70 had she been alive, and since her passing away on the 27th of December 2007, we can only remember her for the sacrifices that she has given for democracy, for the people of Pakistan, and for stability in our country. We'll be highlighting that in our last segment. Let's begin with the first story, and that concerns Palestine, what Israel has been perpetrating, and of course whether it be new settlements, whether it be what is happening in Jenin. That and more will be discussed, but before that, a short report.
The State of Israel is committing unchecked barbarism against Palestinians. The UN called 2022 the deadliest year for Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank in 16 years. Israeli violence against Palestinians is structural, which is designed to strip Palestinians of their sovereignty and freedom, denying them basic human and political rights, exposing them to uninhibited Israeli state military violence. In the latest bloodshed, Israeli aggression in the city of Jenin led to the death of 6 Palestinians and injured dozens of others. Thousands of Jewish nationalists paraded through the main Palestinian thoroughfare of Jerusalem's Old City. Israel's hardline coalition government has approved plans for thousands of new housing units in the occupied West Bank and given the far-right finance minister sweeping powers to expedite the construction of illegal settlements. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Gulf Cooperation Council have reiterated their support for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Israel to immediately cease all settlement activities in occupied Palestinian territory. Prime Minister Mohammed Shehbaz Sharif has strongly condemned the Israeli expansion plan to build over 4,500 new settlements at the occupied West Bank. Israeli plans to advance the building of Israeli settlements are driving tensions and violence and a major obstacle to a lasting peace.
Senior analyst Yamin, Dr. Tughral Yamin joins us in the studios. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, when it comes to Palestine, nothing new and nothing that hasn't been stopped or paused in any way, apart from sometimes when there is a pause of 3 or 4 days maximum, but then these barbarities continue. And to add to the misery of the Palestinians is the fact that the Israelis are adding more and more housing societies, more and more units in the occupied West Bank. And also we have a very far-right Israeli government at this moment under Netanyahu, which is also adding to the misery of the Palestinian people. How dangerous under these circumstances is this new Israeli settlement plan that our Prime Minister has also talked about in his tweet?
It is very perturbing. The Israelis are doing it without any qualms. They are evicting the Palestinians from their very old quarters. We know that they had bulldozed the Moroccan quarters sometimes back, a long time back actually, which was established by Salahuddin, none other than Salahuddin Ayyubi, and they have erected a plaza over there, marketing plaza over there. So they are doing it blatantly. They have no shame. They have no worries because they think that they can get away with murder. They go on killing sprees. They can kill toddlers. They can bulldoze a young woman who was stopping their settlements. They can shoot down a journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, we know it, and they can get away with anything, and they come up with excuses which are not plausible, which are not credible, and yet the only thing that they receive is a mild slap on the wrist by people who matter, but nothing more than that. Even this time, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that they should stop new settlements. They're doing it at the expense of the Palestinians.
But it's not just the settlements, it's the barbarity. Then you talked about Shireen Abu Akleh, and the fact remains that her and there's been another incident revolving around a journalist as well, who's been injured in the latest series of attacks in Jenin. Now the fact remains that none of this goes, noticed, so as to say, but there's no reaction whatsoever as far as any action by the global north, especially by the global north is concerned. Although we see more and more reactions from the Arab world. We've seen GCC Secretary General who's highlighted what has happened in Jenin, but we'll come to that. Coming to these settlements, nothing new. The Palestinians are also being removed from their houses and the Israeli settlers being put in their place. This is illegal under any law whatsoever. Who can the Palestinians contact in your point of view when you see openly that there is not much help that they are getting?
There are forums, international forums like the UN, there are forums like the Organization of Islamic Countries, there is the Arab League, so many forums where they can present their case and where they can expect some kind of support or reprieve. But even among Muslim countries, there is no resonance with the Palestinian cause. In fact, many of the Muslim countries are now making peace with Israel, even in the Middle East.
But the fact remains, making peace on one hand, but criticizing what it is doing should also be taking place in parallel. Nobody can, stop you from making peace, but at the same time, you also need to condemn what is happening.
Yeah, you should call right and wrong wrong.
Exactly.
But that's not happening. So it's unfortunate. Palestinians are one of those people who are suffering the worst kind of fate in the contemporary world. There are many other people like the Kashmiris or the Rohingyas who are facing similar kind of situation. Kashmir also, we know that
it's a very similar situation.
Absolutely, and
it seems as if the model is being replicated.
Absolutely, and Modi is in the US these days, and he's as usual
just arrived in Washington.
Yeah, and he's as usually getting a red carpet welcome, and he'll be addressing the Congress as well. But there are voices like Ilhan Niaz, who's sorry, not Ilhan Niaz, but that lady from Somalia. Her name was Omar Ilhan. Or Ilhan Omar, the other way around. Ilhan Omar. So she has been she has been criticizing them, but what is happening in occupied Kashmir, but nothing much is coming out of it.
That is so true. That is so true. The fact remains that there is a certain mindset as far as issues such as Palestine or Kashmir are concerned. Coming back to Palestine, our Prime Minister tweeted something that we have also addressed many a times in the past. He has tweeted that the Israeli plan of new settlements makes the two-state solution and the whole concept of it even more distant. Do you feel that this two-state solution that even Palestine has agreed to will ever materialize?
No, not in the short-term future. I don't think so. Perhaps in your lifetime, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that not enough is being done to create an environment where this.
And why is that? Why is an environment not being created?
Because the people who matter don't want it to happen. You see what happened with the unfortunate boat tragedy in the Mediterranean. People saw that the boat is sinking and they let it sink. So it is apathy at its worst. They do not want a people to get their share of justice or what they deserve or the land that they is truly theirs, and there is no end to what the Palestinians call Nakba.
But you know, yes, exactly. And I was reading somewhere that the new generations of the Palestinians who had originally witnessed the Nakba in the 60s continue to witness some form of the Nakba in one form or the other, because the fact is that the same atrocities continue in one form or the other, whether it be in the form of violence, whether it be in the form of denying land to the Palestinians, which is has been their land since decades. This said, let's come to another factor, and that is the violence in Palestine. Let's talk about Jenin. Let's talk about one of the biggest military raids that has happened in the occupied West Bank, in which even military helicopters of the latest variety were used, and 6 people have died in this Jenin raid. Do you feel that under this new far right or extreme right government, Israel is looking for any and every opportunity to escalate violence in the region?
They are. They are actually using a sledgehammer to swat a fly. That's what they're doing. And as I mentioned earlier, they can go on killing spree, killing even toddlers. They have no shame, so to say. For them, women, toddlers, old people, they're all fair game. Nobody can stop them. Apparently, so it seems. And I do not know what Allah Almighty has planned for the Palestinian people.
I hope there's some justice that will come sooner or later. The Gulf Cooperation Council did react to it. The Secretary General Jassim Mohammed Al Abu Dhabi criticized the storming of the Jenin camp, and he offered his condolences. What can organizations like the GCC, the Arab League, the OIC do in order to stand by the Palestinians?
That's a very good question. There is this concept of protection of civilians, and it has been accepted by the United Nations organization. Pakistan was the prime mover of protection of civilians. And I had written an article, a very detailed article, in which I had advocated that there should be some kind of peacekeeping force in Palestine which should implement protection of civilians, because the global north preaches it a lot, protection of civilians. That the civilians should be protected at all costs, and these people who are being killed blatantly in Palestine are civilians. They are not members of their law enforcement agencies. They are not bearing arms. They are just unarmed civilians. So I think there can be a way in which Islamic countries, OIC, can say that, okay, we'll send a peacekeeping force which will make sure that innocent people are not killed. They should be protected, because there's nobody protecting them. The Israelis
can do whatever they want, basically.
Really, absolutely. They call themselves the self-defense forces, but they're not self-defense forces. They are very, very aggressive. They can.
And then to add to the misery is the Israeli settlers. Absolutely. Then to add to the misery, that throw stones at the cars, that throw stones at the Palestinians that are there. I'd like to understand something regarding Jenin. Why do you, in your point of view, does Israel continue to raid Jenin over the decades? Do you feel they think that Jenin is a center or a symbol of resistance?
That's what they think. They think that this is a place from where, in their reckoning, all terrorism, so-called terrorism, erupts from. So that's why they continue the raids on Jenin. Obviously, when you kill people, then there's going to be some kind of resistance. There's going to be some kind of retaliation. So Palestinians do try to retaliate in their own very small, modest way. So they want to eradicate all kinds of resistance from Jenin. And Jenin is one of the largest cities of Palestine. So they go and raid
Then
Jenin.
Why use more and more new forms of ammunition? Like this time they used helicopters, they used other means to exert their violent tactics in the region. Is this some way to subdue the Palestinians?
See, the more sophisticated weapons that they use, you will show what the Americans call awe and shock and awe. So they are trying to do that, and it has had a very long-lasting effect on the people, the young people. They have been traumatized. There is a serious mental health issue in Palestine because women have suffered, the young children have suffered.
True.
Okay, if you say that the men of fighting age can survive these kind of situations, okay, let's say that they can. But for anybody, a normal person, when he is confronted by tanks, when he is confronted, or he or she is confronted by helicopter gunships, and in the case of settlers with bulldozers, when they destroy your houses or settlements, it's a very traumatizing experience.
It is traumatizing for them, and I've heard that there's also within Israel an opposition that is slowly and steadily developing against these tactics by the extreme right. Now, not only do they attack the Palestinian citizens, but they have also this time in Jenin attacked the medical crews, so that they cannot attend to those who've been injured.
The Israelis have no, they do not stop from killing doctors or paramedical staff, etc. We know that they have been bombing UNRWA run hospitals also, bearing large Red Crosses or Red Crescents. So they have been doing it, but again, nobody's stopping them.
But to what extent, to which end? I mean, what is the end game of Israel? To exterminate any and every Palestinian that lives in the territory? To do what? What do they want?
That's exactly what they want. They just want to cleanse that area. It's a form of slow but sure ethnic cleansing. They are trying to kill all Palestinians, remove
but
all
look at them,
traces
didn't they go through the Second World War and the aftermath of that? Don't they realize that they're doing exactly what they were subject to?
Absolutely. They are replicating the Holocaust which they suffered, in which they say 6 million Jews were exterminated by Hitler. They're doing exactly the same. And Hitler might have sent them to the gas chambers. They are doing it slowly.
You know, such a sad state of affairs, Dr. Tughral. In all of this, let me quote also some statistics. Since the start of this year, Israeli forces have killed at least 170 Palestinians, including 28 children. You yourself said that they don't see who's in front of them, whether it's a child or a woman or an elderly. The death toll includes 36 Palestinians killed by the Israeli army during this 4-day assault on the besieged Gaza Strip between the 19th and 13th of May. We all remember that as well. Not very far back, just a month back. So, you know, you talked about UNRWA, you talked about that they target their official hospitals as well. But the United Nations was created in order to create peace in the world, to stop wars. But this incident, such as these incidents, such as what happens in Kashmir, continue unabated. Is that because of the power that certain countries exert on the Security Council to veto any and all you know, resolutions regarding Palestine or Kashmir, or is there more to it?
That's primarily it's the powerful nations, the P5, who some way or the other support Palestine, although China has been an exception. Mahmoud Abbas was there recently, and Chinese did say that they support the Palestinian cause. But the other nations, Western nations, Western European, the US, they are firmly in league with Israel. They do not condone any of their atrocities. They just sit there silently, look
silent spectators.
Silent spectators, and they actually encourage them to do it. In many of their...
Because if you're silent, then you're in one way or the other letting them do what they want.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Dr. Tughral, also, you know, you talked about the United Nations. I'd like to again refer to what you had said. Antonio Guterres has called on Israel to immediately cease all the settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory. Also, the United Nations Middle East envoy, Tor Wennesland, who is the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, says he is deeply alarmed by the continuing cycle of violence and is appalled by the continued loss of civilian lives, and he urges all sides to refrain from steps that could further inflame an already volatile situation. But is anybody listening?
Nobody is listening. And there's another thing which we tend to forget. That's that the Israelis often, more than often, raid or storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Their ministers just walk into the mosque and they violate the mosque, and they violate the various understandings that have been given that Al-Aqsa Mosque is meant for the Muslims and the Muslims to pray, and they do it regularly and deliberately during Ramzans, particularly when their religious events are overlapping the Muslim religious events. So they have no, they do not respect the sanctity of the holy mosque, which was the first Qibla of the Muslims.
That is so true. Dr. Tughral, also, you know, I would like to return to what we had discussed about Israeli settlers as well. They also, I mean, just recently, just hours after the shooting in Jenin, they also streamed through the Palestinian towns. They tried to torch property, smash cars with stones, and opened fire at Palestinians who had ventured out of their homes. Why is there this open permit given to even Israeli settlers to do whatever they want as far as violence is concerned? I mean, I can understand the extreme far-right Israeli government, but I fail to understand the role played by the Israeli settlers in escalating the violence.
See, in 1967, Al-Aqsa Mosque was burned. It was burned, and nothing happened. So that set a precedent because you can get away with anything. So settlements came after that. Settlements were not happening before, but much earlier than that, the turn of the last century, the Jews had started buying properties and evicting the Palestinians from their land. So this has been going on, and there has been no resistance from the Arabs in a meaningful way. Yes, there were wars in 48 and 67 and 73, but after that, peace has been made by Egypt, by Jordan, by other countries with the Israelis, and the Americans are supplying these countries who have made peace lots of weapons. They are on their supply list, and these countries, these Muslim countries, also think that it's not good to interfere with whatever Israelis do in the lands that they've occupied, which is unfortunate. There should be more unity among the Muslims, among the Arabs about what can be done to prevent the fate that has been inflicted on the poor Palestinians. This is not
I see nothing concrete being happening, at least from the global north. But I would also like to add to what the Israeli government is doing. Israeli officials have called for military operation in the West Bank, as per the latest reports. The defense minister that is quite vocal, Yoav Gallant, was convening with the Israeli army chief and top security officials to discuss a response to the shooting, because some of the Israeli officers were also shot at. Now is the time for military operations in Judea and Samaria, he said. The National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir, that of course is one of the top people of Netanyahu, he has stated that, referring to the West Bank. And he talks about launching targeted assassinations from the air, take down buildings, deport Palestinian fighters, impose the death penalty.
The problem in Israel is that most of their top leadership comes from the military. It's a very heavily militarized state. Most of them, or all of them, have to serve in the so-called self-defense forces, and most of them then make careers in politics, generals, etc. So their mindset is heavily
already hardline.
They talk about military operations as if they are still serving in the military headquarters.
I understand.
So that is one reason that they do it. If they have been civilian politicians, perhaps they might have been thinking. Perhaps they might have been thinking differently, but not Israelis. All of them have served in the military. All of them.
So the outlook is quite pessimistic.
for the time being,
at least it seems so.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unless and until important forces get together, all the Muslim countries get together, important organizations like the OIC, the GCC, the Arab League get together and have a very firm stance against what is happening in Palestine.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tughral, Yamin, senior analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us.
Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure to have you here in the studios to discuss. Thank you very much, sir. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the United States of America and India. Now, many of Joe Biden's fellow Democrats have urged Joe Biden to raise the human rights issue with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is in Washington on an official visit to the country. Apparently, this visit of Narendra Modi to the United States of America has been projected as a milestone as far as the ties between both the countries are concerned. 70 plus lawmakers have signed this document that you can see a copy of, with the signatures of the different legislatures, that they are concerned about religious intolerance, press freedom, internet access, and the targeting of civil society groups. And that is the reason that they want that all of this, especially the human rights issues, be highlighted with Narendra Modi during his visit. Whether that will happen or not is another question altogether. This said, what is important is that this is being highlighted, and then there is a genuine concern within the United States as far as its government is also concerned regarding what India has been perpetrating. Not far back in May, there was a report also that came from the United States of America that also highlighted the human rights atrocities that are happening in India. And there's a huge list of these atrocities if you come to it. The way, let's begin with the way the Muslims are being targeted, not only in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir area, but also outside, all through within India. Then come the Sikhs, then come the Dalits and the Christians as well. There is a genuine attempt by the current BJP government to to materialize the Hindutva policy of the RSS and to make or to convert India into a country that would be primarily a country of the Hindus. And under all of this ambit, the BJP workers have been continuing brutalities in different parts of India against the Muslims, and that is why a lot of countries, a lot of people in the West, in the United States, are extremely concerned about what is happening, about what is going on in India, and that countries such as the United States need to highlight that. But will that be highlighted or not is another question altogether, because that was asked by the to the United Nations representative, and he said that, of course, he did not give a direct response, but he did say that all issues of concern are highlighted during discussions of Mr. Biden with his other presidents or prime ministers that come and visit him. This said, these fellow Democrats, dozens of fellow Democrats that have urged President Joe Biden to raise human rights issues with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his trip to Washington is as per a letter. We showed you excerpts from that and the signatures of the different people. The US lawmakers say that they are concerned about different important things. Let me highlight that: religious intolerance, press freedom, internet access, and the targeting of civil society groups. We've been joined by Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan. He is a former ambassador and a foreign affairs analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, as always. Modi, you remember well, after the Gujarat incident, was banned from ever entering the United States. And now he's been given more than a state welcome this time when he goes to Washington. What has changed? The US priorities or the US's Asia-Pacific strategy?
This demonstrates the changing geopolitical situation in the world. A person, butcher of Gujarat, a person who had been restricted to enter into the United States territory and many other countries. But now he's during the Biden's entire tenure, he's the third head of the government who has been invited as a state guest. So that is the importance and significance given to Indian Prime Minister. But that is not really, that is not going without.
But Dr. Saab, this said, I'd like to understand, why is Modi visiting the US this time? What are the basic geostrategic or geoeconomic or geopolitical, machinations that are going on behind this visit?
One fundamental point: containment of China. US has already entered into agreements with India, 5 different agreements, and even this visit is basically aiming at deepening the defense collaboration, cooperation, and defense agreements. So this is just one of those 5 agreements which has already taken place, and this demonstrates that all those 5 agreements which has already taken place between United States and India, basically to make it as a counterweight against China. And what are those 5 agreements? Basically, it's the General Security of the Military Information Agreement, which has very few countries have the access to this kind of technology and this kind of facilities by the United States. And second is and the purpose of all these agreements are basically to give a higher responsibility to India, its role in the Indo-Pacific, and that Indo-Pacific we have discussed in different topics on different subjects. but basically Indo-Pacific is the waterways which China is using for its 85 to 90% of the goods and services which it imports or exports. Even the crucial supply is the fuel, the energy which China imports through this waterways. And if these waterways are choked, or India becomes strong with the collaboration and with the alliance of the United States, which is a string of alliance, quads, and ECOWAS is a different thing, but India is not a member. But if we see all these 5 agreements, we will get to know that India is becoming even more stronger than the members of the ECOWAS. Although ECOWAS is a military agreement, but India has already entered an agreement with the United States, logistic exchange of agreement, which and under this agreement they've been able to hand over their Gujarat naval base, which is again a very significant important. So far as China is concerned, even Pakistan vulnerability is increases. And the next one is the communication and info security, which means that they can share the information, the United States, with all their technologies. They can share the information with defense. And what does it mean? That they can give the exact pinpointed location of Chinese deployment, Pakistani deployments. But here basically the purpose of United States is to contain China. So I'll discuss only China, although India tries to make use of it for its own interest. US is not really giving all these armament and equipment and strengthening India, obviously not against Pakistan, but basically against China. And the basic exchange of cooperation agreement, which is the geospatial intelligence, PECA. PECA is most dangerous agreement. So you asked a question that what is the purpose? So I've already given you these 5 agreements, and the critical and emerging technologies. One of the purpose of his visit is technology. Yamin has already met him. Google, Apple, and CEOs are Modi there. So that is the private sector. But on the military side, the United States would further strengthen India. It clears the military technology. And why is it being done? Basically, United States is cognizant of the fact that China is now progressing very fast so far as the technology is concerned, and the space weaponization. Russia and China together, they are gaining a strength, and they have become almost at par with the United States so far as the space weaponization is concerned. And we definitely understand that any future conflict, any future war in this area or in this zone, that the success of those actions would depend as to who is basically more powerful in the space. So these are the basic factors which would be implemented during Modi's. The optics could be different. The optics could be the progress, development, the collaboration, the trade, economy, all those things. Yes, those are also part of it. But fundamentally, the interest of the United States is the one which is the United States foreign policy.
China containment, now, basically to cut it short. I mean, this is what they are aiming at one way or the other. But you know, Dr. Jamil, what I'd like to understand is in all of this context, the US that considered itself to be a champion of democracy, when it looks at India that also calls itself a champion of democracy and pluralism, and is none of that whatsoever, because if you just look at the last reports last month, an official with the US State Department remarked on escalating threats to religious freedoms in India, including targeted attacks on minorities, open calls for genocide against Muslims, and some of these calls have come from the BJP leaders themselves. Then an annual report on religious freedom in May, the US Department expressed concern, and in May, 4th year in a row, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom called on the State Department to designate India as a country of particular concern. Do all of these are all of these concerns put aside just for the fact that there is a certain perspective in mind, and that is China containment?
That's right. You know, and the 75 Congress members, out of which 18 senators and 57 members of the House of Representatives. They've already signed this letter, which you're showing it in your intro. And this definitely has its impact. And this definitely is going to scar the visit of Modi. But is it going to be an impediment for so far as their strategic relation is concerned, strategic relation between US and India? In fact, even in this letter, which has been signed by these Congress members, they have first mentioned that US and India, their relation is very significant, their collaboration is very significant, and United States interest is the prime. But, they've just said, but the human rights violation in India and the marginalization of religious minority, those points should be raised. And that's what they've written in the letter. So I am quite sure that these points would be raised during Biden's meeting with the...
And also the address to the Congress. How can we forget that when he addresses the Congress, we have Rashida Tlaib, who did not sign this letter. She said in a Twitter post, and I quote, that she is going to boycott Modi's address to the Congress. Will other people boycott? And if they do not boycott, will they raise questions, or will they highlight the atrocities that India has been perpetrating?
Well, they would parallelly be the two Congress members. Both are Muslim women. Both are the member of the House of Representatives. Both of them are going to have the press conference parallelly with the human rights activists and human rights organization. So that definitely would resonate the voice of people of, if not all, that at least from the United States, this voice emerging, that their own report, the commission, the religious commission report, and the State Department report about the human rights violation, they are, despite that, Modi is the third head of government or head of state who has been invited as a state guest. And state guest is in the United States, in any other countries, that is the highest importance you can give to any head of government. And this is his
first full diplomatic visit as a state guest of Narendra Modi. This is his first visit to the US as a proper, fully functional state guest.
That's right. In fact, it's the fifth visit, but this is the first visit of Narendra Modi, which is a state visit. And a state visit, by the way, White House takes minimum 6 months to prepare for the state visit. And a state visit in the United States, the state guest has to, normally they are given the respect of staying in the White House. So far, it's a South Korean head of state and the France that they've been able to honor of during the Biden time that they were invited as a state guest. But as I said, that this boycott would definitely resonate the signal that Rashida Tlaib and Omar, they are going to really make a lot of noise. The other members may not really conduct that or boycott that, but at least these two, that make a lot of difference. But before Modi came in, there was a posturing going on. In February, this balloon which was shot down, and yesterday Biden had mentioned it while he was addressing the donors conference, where the journalists were also there, and where he stated a very derogatory remark against the Xi Jinping, saying that Xi Jinping is the dictator of this world, or dictator of this area. So, and it's only yesterday, while Blinken has just visited. So what I was mentioning a little while ago was containment of China and Biden as a state policy, as a policy of the United States. He has started showing that indicator and indication, and started showing that India is much more important to them than than most of the countries of the world. And that is basically, in fact, what is happening here, Omar, Khalid, but that US is trying to pitch India, and Indian academia, Indian think tanks, they are quite cognizant. Some of them are also making statements that India is being pitched against China like Ukraine against Russia. So, and this for the first time it's happening in India, because India normally used to avoid such circumstances. But it appears that India now, for a variety of reasons, it's
But you know, Dr.
and one of
Jamil,
the
what's really interesting is that despite this strong relationship between the US and India, India still continues to have a very strong relationship with Russia as well, with the Russian Federation as well, and the US doesn't seem to mind that. This said, you talked about Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken earlier this year said that the US is monitoring a rise in human rights abuses in India by some government, police and prison officials. It was, of course, a rare direct tribute. Do you feel any such discussion could happen during the meeting between Joe Biden and Narendra Modi?
I think it would just happen, in my view and in my analysis, just as a passing reference, because the kind of significance they have given by inviting Narendra Modi as a state guest and by having the number one agenda of this meeting is the deepening of the defense relations and strengthening India into the Indo-Pacific Ocean. So that means everything would start revolving around it. Of course, the trade and commerce and bilateral trade. And you just mentioned about Russia and India relation. They have a centuries-old, the decades-old relations, basically based on trade. And previously it was the strategic relation, but it's no more a strategic relation. Now it's the relation based on economy, based on trade, based on commerce. India is trying to get maximum from Russia. And how did they do it? They exploited their situation. They exploited their situation because the United States need them. So they started importing those items from Russia which were under sanctions. And the United States didn't really object to it. To India.
My point exactly.
They know
My point exactly. So, you know, despite whatever India does, it's always given a certain immunity, whether it be the human rights abuses, whether it be its relationship with Russia. Before Modi arrived in Washington, White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby, either on one side, he declined to comment on whether Biden would raise the same issue that I talked to you about, the human rights issue, but he did say, quote unquote, that it is commonplace for Biden to raise concerns about human rights. This said, several US rights groups also are planning to protest during Narendra Modi's visit. Will this have any effect whatsoever, direct or indirect, on India's belligerent attitude towards the Muslims, Sikhs, Dalits and Christians in their own country?
No, definitely it would have a impact and effect that their public diplomacy would get impacted. Even the United States, they would find a bottoms-up pressure. But would that be that much pressure that Biden could be forced to take a stand? And what does it mean that United States president, if it takes a stand, then they will start invoking the sanction. The situation which I described a little while ago, there is no way that US could even think of moving it as a resolution or moving it as a unilateral sanction, taking a step as a unilateral sanction. So I think it would mostly be optics and basically be a little bottom-up pressure, but to the extent that White House is going to sustain that pressure, and they would not really let India and Modi feel as much that the United States is going to take any action against it, which India also understands it quite well. And that's why they have pitched themselves and they have accepted all these agreements in which they are obliged to stand against China. So once this situation erupts, in that situation, United States human rights voices, which is going to really resonate tomorrow, the after tomorrow, I think it would be only to the extent that United States would absorb it, and they are not going to be compelled to take any action. Yes.
Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, thank you very much to have joined us and to have talked about this very important issue, that is human rights abuses by India in the whole context of Narendra Modi visiting the US. I'll just end with the quote by Rashid Ahmed, Executive Director of the Indian American Muslim Council, which has also organized a series of protests during Modi's visit. He says, "Our concern is that the Biden administration is whitewashing everything going on in India." I rest my case. Let's come to our last story, and that concerns Muhtarma Shaheed Benazir Bhutto Sahiba and her 70th birth anniversary that is being held today across the country. We are observing this, a lot of other people are observing this, but who was Muhtarma Shaheed Benazir Bhutto Sahiba? She was born in Karachi on the 21st of June 1953. She was politically influential. She studied from all the best institutions across the world. She became the 11th and the 13th Prime Minister of Pakistan from 1988 to 1990 and from 1993 to 1996, the first woman elected to head a democratic government in a Muslim majority country, and nobody has been even to beat her record. The fact remains that Muhtarma Benazir Bhutto Shaheed Sahiba was a champion of democracy. She always stood by people. She was compassionate, she was emotional. She, as per a certain memoir, was, as a girl also, was very attentive towards the animals as well and towards other people. And this is what translated into her becoming a seasoned politician later in her life. She could have stayed in the West. She could have stayed there and enjoyed a fruitful and interesting life, but she chose to come back to her country, to serve her country, and to serve her country not once but twice. When she left hers, ladies and gentlemen, she was only 54 years old. She sacrificed her life for her country, for her people, and upheld the profound connection with her homeland and with all the Pakistanis here or across the globe. This is what we need to remember today on her 70th birthday. Leaders like Benazir Bhutto Shaheed Sahiba are rarely born in countries such as Pakistan, and we need to remember all the philosophy that she stood by and all the important elements of democracy, of pluralism that she also was a part of when she was Prime Minister and leader of the Pakistan People's Party. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.